Okay. She says she's going live right now.
I hear music.
Oh, that's the clock in the background. We're cuckoo clock city at our house.
It says we're now streaming live on Facebook, so I think we are good to go.
Yep, we are. We're there.
Welcome everyone to NSEA's Facebook Live. I am so excited that we are back again. We were trying to figure out how many weeks it's been. We always say, oh, this happened 2 weeks ago, but now it seems like it was 4 years ago. So we're really kind of in a when did that really happen mode, and what really happened, this week in your life. What really happened in my life this week? Well, really it had happened in our lives with my grandkid. I have 7 grandkids, and my 8th grandchild was born on the 16th of April. And Maddie said I should show a picture, but do you think that I could actually find one really quick on my phone? But I will find one pretty soon.
I'm shocked.
I know.
Jenni,
I was looking, I was like, where is a picture of this grandkid? Because I had a ton of them. I have one. Oh, here it says. Here, I found it. All right, here we go. Here we go. Spencer Joseph Hess was born. He weighed 8 pounds, 9 ounces on April 16th. So in the middle of this horrible, crazy pandemic, good things are still happening. And although this grandma's a little annoyed by all of it, that I can't be hugging and touching my grandchildren, but it's okay.
I'm sure all their parents will be happy to give all of them to you for an extended period.
I was just saying, my daughter said that I could have them all for 1 month when this is all over. I said, yeah, no, that's not how this works. But I am happy that you're all with us. I hope that you can all think of some things that you have as blessings and that you're grateful for. I know it's a very stressful time, and we are happy at the Nebraska State Education Association to be bringing you these Facebook Lives and be able to chat with you about important things that are happening in our state with education and around. And, we want to really have the facts, and it's important for you to hear it right from the people who are in charge and who are making decisions and who have the important information we need. So we are pleased that Dr. Matt Blomstedt, our Commissioner of Education, agreed to be with us again tonight. In fact, I think he's part of our family now. He was with our board of directors last week for our board meeting, and they asked him some questions, and they had some questions that they still had. So we're going to be talking with him, and Maddie has a special guest with us tonight as well. He's special to her in a lot of ways, but he's very special to us in the state of Nebraska. Maddie, who's with us tonight?
We have Dr. Gary Anthone, the Chief Medical Officer for the Department of Health and Human Services, but I know him as the man who saved my life twice. Dr. Anthone is my personal surgeon and has gotten me out of several very close calls. So he's someone near and dear to my family. And we're just really, when all this went down and I saw that Dr. Anthone was in charge, let me tell you, I breathed a sigh of relief knowing what a great guy he is. Not only as a person, but as a really top-notch surgeon. So we are really lucky to be in his hands. So I asked him if he would come on. He's been great about answering all our texts and questions, as has Matt. And so he has another call to get to tonight with the governor at 8 o'clock.
Governor.
And
I said, well, you should have said, I am busy till 8:30. But we appreciate you being on with us. And Maddie's going to start off by asking some questions that we've had from our members. And then we will jump into some questions that may relate to school and the health as well. And so Maddie, take it away. I'm going to mute myself and go for it.
So Dr. Anthone, I remember when we first started discussing this, one of the things you talked about was the fact that we'd only seen one fatality for somebody under the age of 20. And I believe it was somebody who had cystic fibrosis or something. It seems like we started to see some of that change. Are we seeing a change in the fatality rate among kids, or is there anything you're concerned about with kids now that you weren't concerned about before?
No, I think statistics just caught up with this, Maddie. I think, eventually it was probably going to happen that we'd have some deaths in adolescents and children, still mainly due to comorbidities, and comorbidities just means that you have an underlying medical condition that really makes you more prone to getting an infection or maybe not breathing very well. Like the child you mentioned with cystic fibrosis, the way I look at surviving, if you do contract a case of COVID and it affects your lungs, is how much lung capacity you have. Because once you go on a ventilator, in order to get off the ventilator, and the ventilators are so good today about predicting whether somebody will be able to come off or not, even though there's still doctors that make that decision, it's all about lung capacity. And then after lung capacity, it's about how well you oxygenate your blood while you're on the ventilator. So that's what they mean by comorbidities. And most of the comorbidities are somewhat pulmonary related, even though you hear about diabetes and hypertension and cardiac disease problems. In my opinion, it's all about whether you're going to be able to get off the ventilator. And then while you're on the ventilator, whether you develop another illness. The most common thing to happen while a patient's not doing well is the kidneys shut down. So when the kidneys shut down, then it really gets to the point where now your blood can't filter out the toxins that's necessary. And then those are the two main factors why people are actually dying from COVID, those two main reasons. So, and by the way, being a surgeon was a lot easier than this. So, but I can't think of anything more worthwhile to be doing at this point in my life. So I don't have any regrets whatsoever. And it's an honor and a privilege to serve the citizens in Nebraska and everyone with the Department of Health and Human Services and our governor. So, you know,
you got really thrown in the deep end. When did you officially start?
So I was officially start date was September 3rd, and then confirmed on January 20, or confirmation hearing on January 22nd, and confirmed the following week. So fairly quick process there. And during that time, we did know about COVID. And I remember one of our epidemiologists, Dr. Tom Safranek, coming into our office and right at the beginning of January and saying, I think this coronavirus thing over in China could be a big deal. And I'm going, nah, it's just like, you know, another flu influenza thing. But boy, was he right. It became
yeah. So how are we doing on the whole curve? I mean, we're all teachers. We get the fact that we're trying to flatten the curve so that, you know, our hospitals don't get overwhelmed. I kind of look at my sisters at UNMC. I ask her every day, what's the patient load? What's the patient load? At least from her perspective, it sounds like we're doing good. But we know we've got hot spots in the state. So how do you feel from your perspective? How are things going?
Well, I mean, one of the things that we look at, believe it or not, is that IHME model, you know, that came out of Washington State that sort of predicts when states are going to hit their peak, how many patients will be dying at the peak, you know, time of your surge, how many beds are available to help treat patients, how many ICU beds are available, and basically how many ventilators are available. So when we started off with that model, it was such that we were going to have our peak right around April 23rd. And then it kept getting pushed back to the later date. Right now it's pushed back to about May 1st. And that's a good sign. When that model gets pushed back, that means you're succeeding on whatever you're doing. And people ask all the time, well, why is Nebraska doing well as far as not having that surge like we're seeing in some other states? And my first answer is that we have a great local public health system. I mean, this was all new to me when I took this job, but the state of Nebraska has 19 local health departments. Here in Douglas County, we have the Douglas County Health Department. Lancaster has their public health department. There's 19 throughout the state. And those public health departments are staffed with a director and an excellent staff of epidemiologists and nurses. And they took the lead here. They really did. I got to see it with my own eyes. That first day, I was down at the Douglas County Local Public Health Department with Dr. Poor, who's the director there, and her excellent staff, and saw how when we got that first case, the girl that traveled from England, how they went into action. And it was unbelievable. You know, they had to do these contact tracings where they had to find out who was in contact with the patient. And that really made it so that we, just like I said, that model kept pushing back. because our local public health departments did a great job of doing these contact tracings, getting those patients quarantined, getting them tested, and then getting them isolated if they needed to be. And to me, that's one of the first reasons why we haven't had really a surge yet. And then the second reason is that Nebraskans usually are compliant people. And I mean, you know, they've really done well about social distance.
We're Nebraska nice, right?
Nebraska nice. I mean, you know, as you know, Maddie, I moved away from Nebraska for 15 years and I couldn't take it any longer, so I moved back. But you know, it's totally true. I mean, I've lived on the East Coast, I've lived on the West Coast, and there really isn't any like type of population that we have in Nebraska. So I think that's the second thing. And you know, just as important is our leadership. We've had great leadership here through this. You know, there's been a lot of decisions that were made. You know, Commissioner Blomstedt made a great decision early on, and he and I remember that day probably when we were making a decision about the state boys basketball tournament, you know, and I'll let him speak to that. But I mean, we took the lead in canceling major sporting events. I think, I don't know what you think, Commissioner, but to me, I think we took the lead in that. And that was a big decision that wasn't easy to make back then. It sounds easy now, but back then it wasn't easy. So I want to say there was some, I'll call it divine intervention maybe involved here. You know, that week that we had our first case, we had most of our major school districts were on spring break. And so we had about a week to think about things and to make the right decisions. And again, I'll let Commissioner Blomstedt speak to that. He remembers that probably better than anybody, but that really helped out a lot. But so far, you know, we're doing well. And like you say, Maddie, it's just the hot spots we have to worry about. You know, I think as a state, we're doing fine though.
So one of the things that we know, we've heard about that before we can go back to school, you know, or before life goes back to normal, even before schools, is, you know, the things have got to trend down, but we have to have more tests. How do you feel that we're doing with the tests? I know I saw one of our members she didn't even have symptoms, but she got to do a drive-through test in Norfolk via the National Guard. So where are we at in terms of our testing in the state right now?
So, you know, since I was on the ground level here, I remember back when we had our first case in Washington State, and then we went up to about 15 cases in the United States, and it stayed there for a long time, almost 3 weeks. And that was because of the travel restrictions that were put on and the screening that was done at the airports, and everybody traveling back from China got funneled to specific airports and got screened. And then they contacted their local health departments and they were put on quarantine. And so tests had to be limited at that time. Think about this. Back in the first cases, all tests that were done had to go to Atlanta in the CDC laboratory. And that really, it really slowed down testing. And then when they started opening it up, the testing to the state public health labs, you know, it was, Nebraska was lucky because our public health lab is so well known because of all their epidemiology and laboratory work they do at the quarantine center and the biocontainment unit. They were one of the first 3 labs, but it became an issue of, did you have the testing equipment? So everybody talked about test kits. And so we're going, what is a test kit? And a test kit meant a lot of different things. The easiest thing was, did we have the swabs? And did we have the culture media to put the swabs into so the virus could then be processed? And at first that was sort of an issue. It's not really now. And then the machines that do the testing, there's specific reagents that need to be first where you extract the RNA from that viral swab media, and then you put it in another machine where it does a polymerase chain reaction. And those reagents were in short supply. So you could almost say Nebraska was a victim of their own success because we were not a hot spot. And so those reagents went to the states where there was a breakout. And even though we had enough reagents, we had to limit who got tested. And the whole country did that at first. The whole country had to make criteria or follow a set of criteria so that we knew only the highest risk cases got tested. And now those criteria are being liberalized to the point where it will be here in Nebraska not too long where really anybody that will want to get a test will be able to get tested. But believe me, testing is great. It tells you whether you have the virus or not. So then you can go and self-isolate. And then you can contact those people that were in close contact with that patient so you can quarantine them. But it doesn't guarantee you're going to get better. It doesn't guarantee that if you test today, whether negative, whether you're going to test positive tomorrow.
Right.
So it's just a way to do this contact tracing. In the future, though, as testing gets more sophisticated and more widespread, we'll be using testing to decide when it's okay to go back to work. And that's what it'll be pretty much all about, is when it's safe to go back to work. And I think everybody's waiting on these so-called serologic tests. So hopefully you can just get a finger prick, and then you can take that sample and put it through a serological, so you know whether you've developed the antibodies, which means you probably have had either the virus or you've recovered from the virus. And then we'll know it's everybody. It would be safe to go back to work at that time. And
so what's your timeline on all this? Like, you're thinking, like somebody on CNN today just said something about in 2022, like, do you have any clue what kind of, and they've talked, we, as teachers, we talk about the gradual release of instruction. They're kind of talking about the gradual release of human beings. So if you could look in your crystal ball, because I know nothing's perfect, but what do you think?
Well, I think, once we get up to, the governor's been asked this question multiple times at the press conferences about herd immunity. And nobody really knows what it takes for this virus to have herd immunity. But let's say 50% of your population develops and recovers, and now they're immune. That is almost like a vaccine in itself, because now it would take more, contacts with that patient to spread the virus. So we're hoping that will help out at first. I'm almost certain we'll have a vaccine within probably 6 months. So that will help out second. So I don't think they've worked on anything really harder than getting this vaccine. Since the Manhattan Project back in World War II is what it's being compared to. So it's something we'll develop. I mean, America is such a great country and it's so innovative. We'll probably have that by 6 months, at least by next year.
So we have quite a few questions. Just a minute. We have quite a few questions about Hall County and Grand Island and Hastings. What are your thoughts? We have a lot of teachers and families from there. What are your thoughts about those particular counties that seem to have a very high concentration right now?
Yeah. So we track county by county how many cases are testing positive and how many people were tested. And so the number of positives in that county divided by the number of tests that are done in that county are our positive test rate. And Hall County by far is our highest county right now. I think it was up to 45% positive test rate. Whereas the rest of the state is on average 7 to 8%. Lincoln per se is the lowest, Lancaster County is the lowest at around 3.4%. And so we're not, I want to give Pat Lopez and her crew and all the local health directors, just kudos for doing that. But when you think about it, Lincoln's sort of got an advantage because universities shut down. Nobody's really working in the university. And at least state employees that I know, about 40% are working from home. So it's a little bit easier to self-isolate and work from home. And that's why some counties do better than others. I think as you mentioned, Jenny, the real issue are the hotspot areas are usually associated with manufacturing plants, specifically meat processing plants. And that's our main concern at this time. Initially, our concern was long-term care facilities, and it's still an issue, but they've done so much education now, and we had a lot of work going into the long-term care facilities. But if there's one thing I've been sleeping great, don't get me wrong, but if there's one thing that might keep me up at night, it's the meat processing plants and the manufacturing plants, where it's just difficult to social isolate, and that's what's going to happen. So that's why you see that in Hall County and other counties that might have a meat processing plant.
What about retail then? like opening up retail again? We've had several questions about that.
Yeah. The governor really never shut down any retail businesses per se. A lot of them did it on their own. And that's what I mean. Nebraska usually does the right thing. And so, I went to Lowe's with my wife this weekend, and they're doing a great job of monitoring how many people are going in. I haven't been able to shop. I didn't go in myself. I was just outside watching how they were keeping track of how many people go in, how they communicate with each other with their walkie-talkies,
Yep.
how they know when somebody's going in and somebody's coming out. So, as long as we can social distance, in those retail outlets, I think that should be okay. But, I know there's some news about the outlet malls in Gretna. And I drive by there every day, twice a day. And then coming home, I've noticed, one day I noticed there's nobody in the parking lot. Why is nobody in the parking lot? They shut down on their own. But as you know, they'll be opening up again, I think. If they didn't open up this weekend, I can't remember when they're going to open up again. But they're going to keep track of that social distancing. As long as we social distance, we should be fine. And a lot of people are recommending, when you're going to a retail shop, to probably wear a cloth mask or some sort of mask, whatever you have available. And again, I'm sure everybody knows, but the mask is not to protect you so much as it is to protect the people around you. That's the real reason for wearing a mask. So when I see people wearing masks, I commend them, and I say that means they're really conscious about making sure that they're not giving other people the possible virus if they have it.
Excellent.
Well, Dr. Anthone, I know you have to get off and get to another call. On this call, we have a lot of school staff, teachers, administrators. We also have parents. What advice do you want to give to our school staff right now? Many of them aren't in school. We do have still some that are going to school though. But what is your best advice to people who are spending a lot of time with kids right now?
Yeah. Well, as you know, I live here in Omaha, and I have 7 grandchildren myself. And I think it was this week, they had a drive-through where the teachers were able to see the kids, and they were thrilled. I don't know who was more thrilled, the kids or the teachers, but I saw it on Facebook, and it was heartwarming. I know not all schools are able to do that, but I really do think, and you guys know this as teachers, how much your students love you. And I'm sure it's vice versa, but it was just heartwarming to see that. And, that would be one thing I would do, try to, stay in contact if you can. And I'm sure most are, especially with the elementary school children's, that's what it was that I saw where they did that. As far as the medical aspects of that go, I think by the time schools restarted, there won't be really an issue any longer for that. So I think we will make, Commissioner Blomstedt, the governor, everybody will make the right decision on when it's safe to go back to school again.
But you don't see that as being you don't see that as being summer school like in another couple of weeks, do you?
No, I
is not close to you and Matt. Yeah, no.
Not unless the commissioner does, but I don't think he does.
Everyone's doing this. All of you at the same time went.
No.
So I think so.
One of the things that I've learned, I sort of had a crash course here on public health and how to be a chief medical officer. But one of the best things that could have happened to me was to develop relationships with like Commissioner Blomstedt and the other workers that we're working with. Probably would have taken me a year to develop these relationships. And even though I would not wish this on anybody or any citizen, but boy, what a great team we have at Nebraska. So been a definite positive for me to develop these relationships.
Well, I want to thank you. I want to welcome you to the team of being a teacher, because guess what? You're now a teacher.
That's
You're
right.
Teaching all of us. And you may have thought, oh, I'm a doctor, but now you're a teacher because you have to.
Let me tell you, my first job was as an academic surgeon.
Yeah. So there you go. You've been teaching us all well, and we appreciate it. We think teaching is the very, very best profession. So welcome to the profession. We appreciate everything you've been doing. Thank you so much.
It's an honor and a privilege. So thank you guys for what you're doing. And Maddie knows this. I have a daughter that's a teacher too, and so it's in our blood.
There
That's
you
right.
go.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You
We
bet, guys.
appreciate you being on, Dr. Anthone. Stay well.
Thanks for having me.
I
Tell
just
your
have,
wife hi. Tell your wife hi for me.
and I just have to say one thing. I think Dr. Anthone and I met on March 4th was our first actual in-person meeting. I feel like we're among best friends now, and
It's like family now. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know what we're gonna do when it's all over. It'll be like separation anxiety.
we'll be dropping my kids off at your house.
Have you even got to shake hands ever? Just
I don't know. I thought at one time nobody would want to do that again, but I think we'll probably get there. Yeah.
there, we'll get there. Thank
Okay.
you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
guys. Thanks a lot.
You
Bye-bye.
bet. Thank you. Take care.
Now it's just us, Matt and Maddie, and we're going to talk. Some of the questions had to do with, I think he hit on some of the concerns that folks have health-wise as well. And, you know, teachers are a group, and educators and support staff are a group that care about all these other groups as well. So we have a lot of questions in the chat regarding state employees, regarding, you know, retail employees, and making sure everyone's safe, because this affects our students as well. And so we really, you know, the questions, when I'm reading in the chat, all the questions, they're not just about, gosh, what about us? They're about all of us as a whole, because we, you know, we keep saying we're all in this together. But we don't want to be all together. And we still are hearing, Dr. Blomstedt, that there are schools that are still having like staff meetings with 20 and 30 teachers in a room. We don't understand that. Can you address that? There's somebody just posted that.
Yeah, so I haven't necessarily specifically heard of anything where I could say that's happening, but what I will tell you, I mean, regardless, I mean, I certainly recommend, I think all the local public health and Dr. Anthone would also recommend that you maintain proper social distancing if folks are having to gather for meetings. So the notion of being 6 feet apart, wiping down services, doing all of those different things. And I've been, you know, I go to meetings at the Capitol and the governor's office, and been in meetings with probably 15 people at a time, wiping down surfaces and doing all of the, you know,
Clorox wipes. Yeah,
exactly. You know, so I mean, I think being extremely cautious is appropriate. I would also say schools, and I'm here in the Central City Elementary building, and I've been here on occasion when during the school day or during the day, and you know, I'm watching food go out in the mornings when I'm sitting here. So, you know, folks are working to serve their students. And again, I just highly recommend that in any setting that you're doing all of those things that are really necessary. I'm really kind of pleased to see the kind of the direction of masks, because I worry about, you know, how do I even know if I was sick, right? I wouldn't want to share it with anyone else. And, you know, so I think there's any of those things right now, taking that extra precaution, I think is really important. So I would want to see that in any types of meetings or other things that are going on anywhere in the state, and not just with teachers, but in any type of setting.
So before I forget, because I'll forget, and then at the end I'll try to shove it in. When we met with the board the other night, with the NSEA board, we talked about that you have a commission that meets with superintendents and administrators kind of during the week. And we suggested that maybe looking at having a commission of educators across the state, of teachers, to also visit with you every once in a while to kind of fill you in on those things. And so we kind of talked to you and agreed that if we maybe came up with 3 teachers or staff from each of the state school board districts, that we could maybe come up with a group that could meet with you virtually, of course. And so we have a, Maddie, can you put that in the Facebook? Yeah, so we have a link for our people who are interested in maybe being on that. We're going to ask them where they're from, what they teach, so we can get a wide demographic of folks from across the state, and then we'll give some names to you. So maybe we can get that started. Does that sound all right with you?
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. In fact, it's one of the things I've been talking with the deputies and officers and leadership at the agency about. So actually, it was just perfect timing when I met with your board last week and had that conversation. So just, it's great, and thanks for stepping up to help on that front.
Another thing we talked about that's really important to our members that we, is this equal access and equality across the state and special education resources and just a wide variety. And we were talking about broadband and just even, whether or not you have a device or not, sometimes that access to broadband. And I found it interesting. You were talking about, I don't know, a little technical for me, but white space and using, and we're doing teacher TV, and we're still looking for educators to do that. And we are able to do it on television with a $10 antenna, on cable, with an app, a variety of things. And so we're looking at expanding that. But can you tell me the thoughts on broadband across the state? Because, I know people have been kind of dragging their feet on that. And I see that we have a couple state senators on Facebook tonight that have joined us. And I really think that that's something that we really need to talk about.
Yeah, and we've actually had quite a few conversations and have been for a long time. I've actually been on that topic for a couple of years of really trying to push broadband access. We had submitted some proposals to the FCC. I think it was just last summer. We're actually trying to push on those things using, and that was kind of the TV white space, using education broadband service, essentially allowing schools to broadcast wireless broadband to beyond their school setting, right? With some other technology that could come along for that very reason. We are working with the Office of the Chief Information Officer at the state. Also trying to work with others. There's the Nebraska Information Technology Commission that's working with us on that as well. So yes, definitely that's a big issue for a couple reasons. Number one, sometimes access is actually kind of the technical side, right? The fact that they don't have legitimate access into their household, that last mile service, and maybe last several miles, depending where you're at in the state. But also there tends to be economy side of this, right? So the household income is also a barrier. So trying to solve both those things, we've seen some great things come out of that. We're also pushing on the federal side for an E-rate for home access, and that's coming along. We've been pushing on U.S. senators, and actually Senator Fisher's on a subcommittee related to that very topic. And so I've just recently been in contact with her office to continue to push on that front as well. So there's more there, and some of it's shorter term, some of it's longer term, but what you're doing on Teacher TV gives us a quick access point and a chance to do that. I think I just saw Bigfoot walk behind you, Maddie. We were joking about that earlier.
That would be Derek. He must need something out of the closet.
So anyway. Well, anyway, no, those lots of good things on broadband, but it's really critical for an equity issue. And so, I've seen some great things out of schools and how they're thinking about expanding their access to technology as part of a strategy to mitigate that concern as well.
One of the other things that we really wanted to chat about and figure out, and we've been, trying to see what we can do also as NSEA, is about special education services and making sure that we can help our teachers provide the services and make those accessible and equitable services for special ed, for ELL, for a wide variety of things. But is there any talk with NDE? I know some of the ESUs, when I've met with my members across the state, some of the ESUs are doing like Zoom conferences for particular subject area, for particular grades. Is there any thought of NDE doing some of those Zooms, especially for special education, since there are so many mandates and levels to that?
Yeah, I think there's been quite a few strategies of trying to communicate. So I don't know for sure. But I know our team's been working pretty hard on a couple different fronts. One was, number one, just the interpretations and what the requirements were for a federal level. And we're actually still working on a federal side approach. But I thought it was extremely important to work with our disability advocacy groups as well to kind of talk about where that could go, how we could be thoughtful. I know one of the concerns that I've had is the ability for teachers to reach out directly to their students, right? And how do we balance that? And I know a lot of schools legitimately were concerned about, hey, look, we don't want to misstep. Federal laws is not something anyone wants to be breaking.
No, don't want to.
It just
As a special education teacher, don't want to do that.
So, but I do think we're really trying to look for, I'll call it flexibilities around those spaces so we can reach out. The most important thing, quite honestly, is, as special ed teachers know, is serving that individual student what their needs are. And we know we have some limitations right now, but it's that communication between family and student and teaching staff and the school district itself that's really critical. And we found some barriers in that, right? So we need to figure out how we can remove some of those barriers going forward. One thing I will tell you is I think most people are reasonable and understand the situation that we're all in, right? And so we have this chance to really be thoughtful and creative. And later this week, in fact, at a national level, I'm having conversations with various advocacy groups in the nation as well, because they really liked my model of what we were trying to do in Nebraska and find a way that we can do that legitimately in the nation. A lot of concern about undoing something in IDEA. I have no desire to do undo those really the work that's been happening for the last 40, 50, 60 years to improve educational access for special needs students.
Well, we appreciate that. And we know that you are, and our listeners may not know, that you are the president-elect of the Chief Council for, and I always mess it up, so tell me, Chief
Council for Chief State School Officers.
There we go.
Good job, Maddie. Points
yeah,
for Maddie.
she knows that CCS, so
yeah.
So that is exciting, and I'm the kind of person that knows that I learn from my colleagues across the nation in what they're doing and what they're learning. There is absolutely no reason for us to not, as Maddie always says, the best things are, what do you say, Maddie? Borrowed, stolen.
The best ideas are borrowed or stolen from teachers.
Stolen, yeah, we're all about that. Yeah. So I just think that bottom line with everyone, with our educators, with our support professionals, with everyone wants what's best for children. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help and support with NSEA, with NDE, with the health department, with the state. Everybody does, because we continuously talk about our children being our future. And it is no different now, whether we're in the middle of our pandemic or not. They still are our future, and we need to really, concentrate on those things. Maddie, have you been watching the chat? Are there some?
So Matt, what people would really like to know, they want to kind of get down to some brass tacks on this stuff. Like, what's up with summer school, right? Like, we're hearing people are like, oh, we're going to plan for, are we going to be in summer school physically?
So here's what I would be recommending at this point in time, right? And I think I've had a conversation with a lot of school administrators and others, but I anticipate we'll have to push out a little bit more information. I really don't believe that June is going to allow us to be in this kind of physical environment with students. And so I would be recommending that schools that are going to be doing summer school are really looking towards digital and remote types of means right now. And I know for elementary, and even what we're just talking about on special needs and students that are trying to catch up, we're really trying to look for some ways that we can scale up some of that activity. So our staff, Dr. Epler, who's our chief academic officer, and also our special ed team. So Amy Rohn, who's I think she started as our special ed director like about a week after our first case of, there's been a lot of that, but we have folks really talking about what that could look like and how we can be productive in working together. And schools probably have some great ideas as well. I've even recommended at a national level that we kind of have a national summer school kind of clearinghouse of resources and other things that can be shared. And so I just don't anticipate that June looks too promising for that. I mean, if we prepare really hard for remote type of learning environments and something else happens, that's great. But I think as Dr. Anthone when we were all shaking our head, I think that's around summer school. Now, I will say that's June, July, a little harder to predict, and we don't know where July's at. I think I saw a question or two about, could something happen in July? I think that's kind of a hold on and wait. But at least maybe there might be some things that are starting to open up a little bit more. And so we'll kind of see. It makes it really hard to plan, obviously, in this setting. One of the things, and probably this advisory group that we've talked about from a teacher standpoint, can be a key partner in this effort as well. When we're really looking at what it's going to take to open up back in the fall, and also have conversations about other things and strategies that we might have. Those will be key things. I know I've talked to my superintendent's advisory group. about picking a date kind of in the middle of the summer to what's our data and what types of information do we need to make decisions about what fall looks like. And so I don't have a crystal ball, just like everyone else that's kind of on this particular front, but I do think we got to plan for a lot of different scenarios and try to put as many kind of safety nets in place as possible so we can be ready to serve students this fall. It's going to take us some work yet. And I know I was quoted this. I don't know if it was really a quote that it wasn't going to be normal this fall. Maybe it was a quote, but the reality is it's not going to be normal for a while in the country. I just hope it's not as bad as, on some projections. And I hope we have an ability to kind of start to gather in different ways. Time will just have to tell in this case. So continue to watch that, continue to work with all of our health officials, and we'll continue to do that to make the right decisions.
Matt, we're always so big in Nebraska on local control, right? And we understand that that's really important. But in cases like this, and in things that are impacting so many, there's also places where there would help to be some consistency in what we're doing. What parameters do you have to work within around that? Like, what's your authority? What can you and can't you do?
Good question. No, I mean,
ourselves that as well. So
yeah. I mean, what I will say is, and I've joked about it before with others, people would call me up and say, tell us what to do. And I said, that's funny. No other time in the history of the state has anyone called up and said, hey, commissioner, tell us what to do. So it's an interesting kind of point in time, but I do think we're really looking for a set of best practices collaboratively. Even though we're a local control state, we do a lot of things collaboratively. And so for us to, we had to do a lot of things quickly. There's probably more things that I've made decisions about, or at least recommendations about, that ended up getting implemented in this short window of time. Not all of them were necessarily exactly the right thing to do. Not all of them were probably, we had all of, like a day or two to think about it. So I don't know what I was doing, but the reality is we made some pretty quick decisions about what this might look like. But we wanted to do it, number one, with people first, right? As much as we could, to think about the safety and well-being of Nebraskans and students. And so a lot of decisions have been made at this point in time. We're really quickly to think about what was best known at that point, at the moment that we were making those decisions. Now we have a little bit of maybe luxury, I'll call it, not a lot, but reshaping and having conversations about what the future looks like, and getting thoughtful about and creative about the types of things that could be in place to really serve students well. And so that's what we'll continue to do. And again, I think you'll see more collaboration as a result of that. My authority is probably largely based on, leadership is I've joked with people. I don't know if joke's the right word, but I'm like, when people say, how do you know a leader when you see one? I say, well, look for people with followers, right? I mean, so if I'm out there leading and no one's following, it won't do us a lot of good. So I'll try to lead in such a way that it's really the best, with the best thoughts in mind and the best practices in mind.
Well, we really do appreciate having these conversations. We hear from other friends across the nation who may not have that kind of conversation with their chief school officer. And so we do appreciate that. We have a lot of questions about support staff and what can we do to help our support staff? Are there things that they could be doing now to help our students as well? What are your thoughts on that? From paras to secretaries to bus drivers, people that, really sometimes are being left out.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of covered the gamut. I know some places have made decisions just to keep folks employed and find work for them to do, to other places that maybe said, and it's been complex because the federal law kind of allowed some layoff that would pay for some of that time. So I think it's become fairly complex for that arena. But I really do believe there's actually a lot of work to do, right? I actually am much more concerned right now about family well-being than even specifically about their educational opportunities that are maybe being lost or missed in this moment. So, seeing how we can use, and I think we've seen it across the state. So I don't think I'm saying anything that's not even happening. I know we've used bus drivers in ways to help make sure that there's food delivery in some places. I know that we're using paras and folks to help prepare information for families and students and be able to serve them. I know that we even have places that are calling families just to do kind of that wellness check. So, I mean, I would just encourage folks to really be thoughtful about that. I know the governor and I were really actually pretty closely aligned on this notion of keep folks employed, because that's a big deal, right? You know, it's a big deal for them. But the reality is, if you don't keep them employed, you might lose them as future employees. And we actually need the bus drivers, and we need the paras, and we need you know, administrative assistants and others that can be part of that system. And so I think in many places we've done really well. And I know in other places they had to make decisions that maybe look different than that. But the reality is, I think there's plenty of work to be doing. And if to the extent that we can find ways to keep folks engaged, I think that's going to be very helpful for us, especially in the recovery effort that is ahead of us yet.
Well, I know we have our children's fund, which is a fund that we have that helps families across the state. And we have had members utilizing that. This is the first time that we've had members utilizing that for food or for utilities. We've even had some for childcare, for essential, you know, if their families are working. So we want to remind our members that the Children's Fund is there to help and to help even our members who have, you know, situations where their families are struggling as well. And also we're looking then at our Children's Fund to say, how then can we help through our Children's Fund if we aren't getting individual requests, that we could maybe donate to the Food Bank of the Heartland that serves all 93 counties, because food insecurity is a big situation across our state as well. And the schools are doing a pretty good job in some cases. You know, Lincoln just opened up two or three more sites here in Lincoln because the need was so great. And I know they're doing that across the state as well, which helps with those other workers we're talking about. But they, you know, they need that protective gear as well when they're giving out food and things like that. So it's just a whole gamut, isn't it? It's just everyone is pitching in to help.
It really is. And one of the things that I think in the first week of identifying our first positive case in Nebraska, I had reached out and started talking to the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation and others to start thinking of some processes. The ESUs have been wonderful to be having conversations region by region. And then there are so many different regions. Our local health regions are working very hard, but there's other regions around the state that, you know, provide, you know, behavioral mental health services. So we're really working on system alignment in a way that I don't think would be possible at any other moment in time. But we're actually, as we've talked a little bit about Grand Island, and just last Thursday evening when we had a regular meeting of these groups, we're actually having conversations about what are the needs, so you can link potential providers to the needs that might be taking place in a community. And, you know, one of the things we talked about, they were needing diapers, for instance,
Yes.
in Grand Island, and you know, types of things that maybe don't normally show up in the kind of in the schools arena per se, but because of our connection in the early childhood space, because of our just connection to parents, you can see how we can help kind of provide some of those supply lines and be able to continue to do that. And communication's been absolutely key as well. So our schools' connections to families have been really important, especially for our English learner families, and being thoughtful about how we can kind of use those resources. So again, we're still learning. I mean, and we're working very closely with Department of Health and Human Services as part of that strategy, but a lot of other partners and community partners as well. That it really does take all of us to try to address that type of challenge.
Definitely takes a village. Maddie, what other questions do we have in the chat?
Yeah, so one of them is, Matt, has your team been talking at all as we look forward to returning to school about some adjusting academic standards or assessments? We know that these kids have missed out on at least a quarter of school, even as much as we're trying to fill things in. So I know you're trying to deal with the day-to-day, but has anybody had a chance to just take a step back and kind of think of how this is going to impact us going forward?
Yeah, actually, I think the first few days in, we actually had a conversation with NWEA about the direction we might want to go given I really think that statewide assessment will be disrupted again next year. I can't promise that, but my recommendation would be that it is disrupted. And here's why, because I'd like to spend those resources on an approach that would allow us to baseline where students are really at. We're going to have to be able to address kind of the challenges. And I really appreciate it. I had a meeting with my peers nationally on Friday, kind of late Friday afternoon. And my counterpart from Ohio.
Come on, just admit it was a TGIF with all the chiefs. You all had a libation in hand. Come on.
I don't think I had a libation. No, I should have had one. But the reality was, I mean, I think there were 40 of us on the call, and somebody said, "Hey, look, we need not call this learning loss," and that what we need to call this is, "Hey, look, when we return, we're gonna have learning recovery. We need to know where every student's at. We need to be able to address that." By the way, that's what we do in education, right? We know where every student's at. How do we address their needs? And I think as a state, that's what we'll be looking at. And in fact, another great conversation point for the advisory groups as we're creating those, to really talk about what's our best strategies to do that. Every student's going to have a different impact on them in this setting, right? For a lot of different reasons. And we're going to have a lot of kids that we already know had maybe trauma and challenges in their lives, but every kid's going to have some element of disruption from what they've been used to. And how do we help them recover? And how do we help one another recover in that space as well? But I think we're going to have some pretty exciting things, I think, come out of that. I just don't know what all of them are yet, but I think we have a great set of partners to start doing that work.
One of the questions that we were asked was, we know we all have had to deal with this, retiring teachers can't come back for 180 days, yada, yada. As we're all thinking outside of the box, any chance we can think outside of the box on some of that too? Because we're worried, we've got student teachers who weren't able to finish out. So what's going to happen with their certification? What's going to happen with, getting these, how are they going to student teach? I mean, this is going to impact our supply line for times to come. So
and we're going to be very flexible with teachers going through teacher prep side. So number one, I don't think that'll be as big of a concern. We'll find ways to work with all of our Nebraska teacher prep institutions anyway, relative to those experiences. I think the retirement side's an interesting one, and I appreciate the question, but it's actually not one I can waive, number one. I'll just tell you that. So it's probably.
I think we just gave you all the power to do that.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. That's what I thought.
Maddie, didn't we do that? You and I right now?
I thought so. Here we go. Raise your hand.
Oh, there we go. Right there.
Go ahead.
Yours is the type of power that puts me in jail. So I don't know if I like that
necessarily. Oh, well then forget it.
No, what I would say is I think that's actually an IRS code related to retirement, but it is not an impossible thing for us to be thinking about, though, even at a federal level. So I'm absolutely convinced that we can have impacts on those types of things at a federal level as well. It makes a lot of sense to me that we would, if we need workforce, that we're able to take folks into that. And there are some flexibilities around some of that from a contracting standpoint that I won't profess to know or understand very well, but I do think it's a great question and one to kind of take back and continue to work on. I really think it has some merit, so.
I mean, like I said, there's so many layers to so many things, and how long we've been doing this? A month? Like, we should have it all figured out. Not even happening.
Through my timeline on this, so it was our first press release was February 28th. I think it was February 27th or 28th. As I mentioned before, my first meeting with Dr. Anthone was on March 4th. Our first case was on March 6th. The announcement around state basketball was March 11th. My first press conference with the governor and a whole bunch of superintendents was March 13th. And then March 16th, I did another press conference, and that's where I was making the recommendation that schools consider closing at least for a period of time. And by about a week later, we were saying, hey, look, schools are probably closing for the rest of the semester, right? So, or operating without students for the rest of the semester. So yeah, I can't believe we don't have it all figured out yet. That's
and there wasn't a handbook anywhere hidden away.
No, I just because I love history, I got to do this. So I have
you have a handbook.
I have a handbook. It's the biennial report of the state superintendent from Nebraska in 1918.
Well,
which he talks about
there
the
you
Spanish.
go, during the Spanish flu.
Well, and I think it's interesting because I think actually in this is what, you know, that 1919 law that paid teachers, right?
Yes, we like
This
that
place
law.
it was written was here. He's making the
Oh my gosh.
report to continue that particular work. I also have the 1917, 1918 school laws that talk about the basically local boards of health and state board of health and all these different things. And I find it funny because they said school was disrupted in 1918 for 8 to 10 weeks. That fall, and actually I think it continued to be disrupted. I got to look at the, you know, the successor reports, but the reality is that was a quarter, right? They lost a whole quarter, similar to what our experience was.
Right.
You know what his report was to schools was basically saying they're going to have to figure out what they need to do that's best for their students. And I'm like, hey, look,
And he didn't have the internet?
W.H. Clemens was no smarter than me. Let's me put it that way. Or I'm no smarter than him, whichever way that is. So, yeah.
Well, we think you're smart, and we really appreciate your guidance and your willingness to work with us and work with our educators. We're excited about starting some sort of teacher commission. We will get on that. And Maddie, I think you put that in the Facebook chat.
I've put it in the Facebook chat a couple times. It's on our website. Just go to the COVID resources. It's under the NTE piece.
Well, and the bottom line is we want people to be well. We want people to be taking care of themselves. We know that there are situations that children and families and our own teachers are in that are stressful, and we want people to take care of themselves. And with that, we know that everyone is dealing with something, and we really hope that you will reach out. We have resources on the NDE website is full of resources. Our website is full of resources for our healthcare as well. And also, if you have questions, you can ask them on our website and on NDEs. There's a place to ask questions, and there's frequently asked questions. So part of it is, you know, I told Dr. Anthone that he was a educator now, he was a teacher now, but we also need to educate ourselves, and we need to find out what we can do and do the very best that we can, and just give ourselves some grace and know that everybody's doing the very best we can. And we really appreciate you, Dr. Blomstedt, and we really look forward to our visits again. We're going to have some upcoming visits, hopefully about some special ed issues. We've had some requests for some mental health and some self-care kind of things. So friends in the chat, if you want to put, if you have someone in mind that you think we should have as our guest on Facebook Live, please let us know. But thank you very much. I'm sure
I got 2 more things, Jenny.
Large group, and Maddie has a few more things.
2 more things. Sorry, I don't want to forget. Number 1, we still need teachers for Teacher TV.
Teacher TV.
So if you are interested in being a teacher for Teacher TV, we are paying $25 for a 30-minute lesson and $50.
27-minute lesson, 3 minutes.
27-minute lesson, so they have commercial.
$25, not 26, not 28, 27 minutes.
Okay, we're paying $25 for 27 minutes, and we're paying $50 for 57 minutes.
Never mind.
Minutes. I don't know, whatever the heck. Anyway, and I said heck.
Oh, heck.
I did. So we still need teachers. That's right. We still need teachers for Teacher TV. We're also doing a series of webinars for teachers. So if you go to the nsea.org website, right at the top, click on webinars.
All staff.
For anybody. And it's on stress reduction. It's on a whole myriad of topics. And we'd be more than happy to have you join us. As a part of that, we also encourage people who would like to belong to the NSEA. We have forms up on our website if you'd like to join us. That's it. You can find those there too. So we just want to say thank you to everybody. We want to continue to be a resource. Please continue to reach out to Jenny and to myself and to our staff. Dr. Blomstedt, just a huge thank you for always being such a great collaborator with us and such a great partner. You've made a difficult time much easier because of what a great teammate you are for us to be working with all the time.
It's a pleasure to work with you as well. So thank you very much.
All right. Stay healthy though. Oh my gosh. Keep washing your hands. Stay healthy.
Wash your hands. Watch the fun music video.
My daughter made us all masks this weekend. She got
good.
Good Good kid.
Yeah, it was good. So
Awesome.
There you go.
Well, I'm
All
glad
right.
you got to go home and work in the yard. That's very
a
important.
little sunburn, I think. I'm not
A
sure.
little sunburn. So we'll be seeing you back in Lincoln. Thank you, friends, for joining us tonight. Please reach out with any questions, and we'll keep questions, and we can reach out whenever you need us. We are here. Thank you very much. Good night, friends.
Be well, everybody.